can only be as honest as you are self-aware, and honesty sometimes is just dumping on somebody.
Susan, what's one simple ritual that couples can implement that builds safety and connectiveness?
One of my favorite couple rituals, a simple couple check-in. What's one thing that has created distance between us? And what's one thing that I've done that's created closeness or trust between us? Real love is just being able to fully be present with what's there, outer and inner world in any given moment. And relationship is kind of a yoga, like a practice.
This week, I was joined by Dr. Susan Campbell. She's been studying relationships and human connection for more than 60 years. Yes, 60 years. She's a clinical and counseling psychologist, former university faculty member in couple and family therapy, and a longtime relationship coach, the author of 11 incredible books all around authentic communication and relational healing. We talk about a couple of the books, including one she highly recommends, From Triggered to Tranquil. Really, at the heart of all Susan's work is something simple but incredibly powerful. When we learn how to build safer and more truthful relationships, we don't just improve our relationships, but we actually build a more meaningful life, something I think we all are aspiring towards. I hope you enjoy this fascinating conversation with Dr. Susan Campbell. Before you go, please hit subscribe to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to your podcast. And now let's get into the conversation. Susan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Sean. I'm so happy to be invited.
Well, I'm delighted that you said yes to have a conversation about many things in the realms of connected relationships. On this podcast, we talk about well-being and how to live a good life. And as we know, meaningful relationships are a big part of that equation. And we're here to talk about how do we create or have really good relationships. And I'm excited to get a peek into your mind as you've written so many wonderful books around this domain, your wealth of knowledge from what I understand, 60 years practicing this field. Just a couple, hey?
It hardly seems possible.
Susan, before we get into the books, the teaching, your workshops, I'm curious, when you look back at Susan, if you're able to say who you were before all of this work, how could you answer this question as who's Susan before all the work she's done?
Well, Sean, I think in a way, ever since I was, somewhere in grade school, I've always been a woman on a mission, or in that case, a girl on a mission. I saw how the world was, and that was the 50s when I was a kid. The 1950s. Anybody alive then? But everybody was so, and this is still true today. But it was so obvious to a little kid. Everybody was trying to look good and look richer than everybody else. I mean, really not that different than today. Cultivate an image, be perfect, and people were living beyond their means. They weren't being honest with each other. And that was the big thing that caused me to go, why can't people just be more honest with each other? I would say to my dad, why don't you tell the higher ups in your company what the customers are saying about, they need a different kind of product. My father was a salesman. And he would say things like, well, no, they would just tell me to get with the program, that I was being negative. And so I watched my father's pain as a businessman, realizing that the product he was selling was becoming obsolete to the customers, but he wouldn't dare report that information to the people who were at the top of the company. And I think some of that still goes on today, too, because a lot of people at the top shoot the messenger and they don't reinforce honesty. So the systems that we're all a part of really kind of repress people into now these narrow little good girl, good boy boxes. And I found fault with that at an early age. I think I was kind of a smart little kid. Thought I could fix the world, And so I have been on that mission to help people feel safer with one another. Really, the way I say it is to help make the world safe for differences. But that can also mean a difference between what I want and what life gives me. And that's a big challenge for a lot of people, is the reality I've got is not the reality I wanted or expected. What's wrong with me, or what's wrong with the world? And, my answer is nothing's wrong, but there's some learning that you're going to have to do to cope better in this world. It's not all about what you want.
It definitely isn't. You mentioned honest, like, why can't people be honest with each other? Through your dad's employer example, you talk about why can't they be honest? How at that young age do you think you were able to take note that, hey, something's wrong here with my dad's work and his honesty and how they're selling? How at that young age did you pick up on this honesty? Was there something here?
Well, I think that I was given a lot of love and security and safety as a child. So, and I was honored for my thoughts and feelings. Everybody, even at 5 years old, people would listen to me, and my mother would write down the things I would say. So I got a lot of confidence in my own ability to see and communicate at a very early age. I was a very verbal kid. So it wasn't from a trauma. I did have some trauma around my mother not being able to nurse me because her milk didn't come down. That we resolved that, but I would say that was my biggest childhood trauma. But my main experience in life was of being loved, cherished, secure, consistent. Not everybody has that kind of a home. So the kind of intelligence that I had at 10 years old was not common. And I looked around and I saw my friends' homes and the way their parents treated them, and the alcoholism that was around in our community and stuff. But I didn't have to deal with that extra heaviness of parents who couldn't manage their own lives. My parents were adults. I give them a lot of credit for my ability to be pretty masterful in this world.
When you said that they listened to me and my mom wrote it down, I'm thinking about myself as a parent and as a husband.
Yeah, good.
And, I get a lot of things wrong, probably, because being a parent and a husband, it's hard. How important is that ability to listen to others in their own creation of themselves when, we're going to get other things wrong as a parent? But how important is it just to simply listen?
That is so huge. I can't stress that enough. And it requires time and patience, which often seems in short supply in our busy lives. So we have to have some compassion for ourselves. But being a parent is a job, but it's also almost like a spiritual discipline. Yes, my personality, my ego has a lot of impatience in it, and I want to, get this information across to my child so they'll have a successful life. But listening is so much more important than getting that information across.
How much more? Very, very much.
Huge.
Huge. Oh.
In every relationship. And it takes, I still have to really discipline myself to listen to my partner, who can kind of take a long time to get where he wants to go with a conversation. And so it's still a practice for me. I see relationship as kind of a yoga, like a practice where you apply discipline. And that would be parenting would be a yoga too. You have to apply some discipline to overcome your automatic tendencies toward just let's get on with it here.
I like the use of word in practice as opposed to reading this parenting guide and you've got it mastered. It sounds like all of this relationship stuff is a practice for
Yes.
for a lifetime. 60 years of
It's a
learning it.
It's a lifetime. Yes, good, well said. Lifetime practice. So if
I
you're
you
deciding
go.
to become a parent or you're deciding to get married, you have to not just look at the romantic part. There's some discipline involved, and my partner doesn't like to hear that. It should all be about love and mushiness, but it takes some discipline to do this thing with you.
It does. There's a saying there, love is not enough. Would you agree with that?
Yeah. Well, the word love is batted around like everybody knows what it means, so I'm not even going to comment on that one.
Okay.
But thinking you're in love is not enough. But real love is kind of what I mean by getting real. And that's the title of one of my books. It's just being able to fully be present with what's there in your outer and inner world in any given moment, and just accepting what is. That's kind of like openness. It's my definition of love. I don't reject any reality because it's here and it's mine to deal with.
I'd like that. I don't reject it. And it seems like this practice of self-acceptance is key to a lot of your work. Our environments are placed on us. And if I heard you correctly, you're talking about the exterior and the interior world. How do we practice this inner world of acceptance?
Well, first you have to be interested in personal development. Not everybody is. I imagine your listeners are at least somewhat interested in personal growth and becoming the best that you can be. So once you have an interest, then you start wanting to know from experts. You read, you watch podcasts, or all this. And one of the things that I would want you to be curious about is, what are my blind spots? And what are my automatic tendencies and blind spots and automatic tendencies are kind of related. I mean, there are a lot of blind spots, but one of the biggest is my automatic tendency to agree with everything I hear. Oh, it sounds pretty good, so I'll agree with that. Just because you are kind of afraid of differentiating. I mean, that I'm not saying everybody who agrees is afraid of differentiating, but some of us are. Go along to get along is a familiar phrase. And so some of us just laugh at the joke that we don't think is funny. And then we realize, oh, that's just an automatic tendency in me. It's not bad. I have to start by accepting it. Or another one would be always looking on the bright side. And I know you're in positive psychology. I mean, I don't fully know I think I know what positive psychology is. I mean, I've been a psychologist all these years, but I imagine there's different flavors of it. But and I used to have the tendency, Sean, to always look on the bright side. I remember my husband put some jeans in the washer one time, new jeans, and he put some bleach in it to make it a little bit older, faster. And when he got it out, the bleach had just ruined the pants. And I said to him with all sincerity, well, it could have been your old pants. In other words, the ones that you're so comfortable with that you would hate to ruin. I honestly had a tendency to always look on the bright side. And that isn't necessarily a negative pattern, but I have to kind of watch that in myself, because there might be some real evil or some real things that I want to say no to that are not okay. And even to this day, I have a tendency to look at the big picture and, maybe not stand up to certain things as much as I should. So we each have a collection of these automatic tendencies. And once you can become more aware of those, you can catch it when you're doing that. Like in money, money advice is one of your topics. And these tendencies can cause you to, and this has been my story, make bad investments because I trusted the person. I didn't do my due diligence. So we have these tendencies, and there's also a tendency to laziness, or not trust that even if I did do my due diligence, that it would be effective. So know and be curious about continuing to know more about your automatic tendencies if you want to live an effective life where you keep growing and learning. So that's just one example.
Thank you. I noticed you really thought about the word effective life. Can I ask why you use that word?
I didn't think about it enough to be able to answer your question right now.
Well, there was a pause, so I'm like, wait,
yeah.
effective. I haven't really heard you. Often it's a good life, a happy life. You said effective.
Yeah, that gets you in a direction of wholeness. So, but it would be the same as a good life. To me, a good life is where you come to terms with all the like I said, the parts of yourself that may not serve you well, but also admire and appreciate the parts of yourself that should be honored. So really, just being realistic about yourself, and also that actually helps you. Once you can do that, you can see clearly an environment and whether it's a yes or a no in any given moment, that sort of thing, because you're not blinded by your need to agree or be pleasing and that sort of thing. So effective, good, same thing, really.
As you talk about these tendencies, and I think everyone can relate to these tendencies, I wonder if there's people who are listening who are like, nah, I like, say it's over-optimistic. I like my tendency of over-optimistic. For those who may be thinking that way, can we first just talk about why and where do tendencies come from? Like, why do we develop them? And then the second part to that question is, can we have this good life if we don't acknowledge our tendencies?
Well, the way I define a good life, no, but let's look at what you just said about what if I appreciate this positive spin on how I see reality, and I like that. Just be aware of it and know that it's going to affect some of your choices, and be willing to suffer the consequences. As I have. I know I'm too lazy to do due diligence, so I am willing to suffer some losses. And my attitude toward money is it's always a learning experience. I don't worry too much about my failures. And there have been some large ones in terms of, losing $500,000 here and there and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's not insignificant. Some of my bad investments, but I make it all back, because making money is fun for me.
Susan, you know a bit about my background. My monkey brain is going wild right now. You said lose $500,000 here and there and make it all back. Can we get a little bit of story behind this curtain?
Yeah. Well, most of it had to do with the man I was married to, because I was. I'm not married to him anymore, but I tended to be a saver, and then he was a spender. And when we first got married, I was always the breadwinner, first of all. So, and he had very little money. I mean, very little experience managing money. And no, this was my denial and my positive spin on him. I'm so in love with him. I want to help him. I want to give him money to, develop this piece of real estate. So I've funded a few of his real estate. He wasn't he was a smart guy, and he could figure out how to do a development project. So, because he mostly had to hire other people to do things. But okay, so we made, with my investment in his sweat equity. We made quite a bit of money besides what I make just as a consultant and a therapist. And no, so he was feeling real expansive, and he made a whole bunch of different investments into mostly non-publicly traded companies, startups. This was back in the 80s. And he always included me in the decisions, but I just looked the other way. And my big mistake was just like thinking everything was going to be okay without really examining what we were doing with our money. I kind of let him handle it. So, don't do that, folks. But part of it is love is blind. So when you get love and money mixed together there, it's not the greatest cocktail for reality, But I honestly, that was, what the best thing about that was when I realized all the money was gone, because these publicly traded companies went belly up. I remember the day I'm in my 4,500 square foot custom home that we designed and built ourselves. So, we were living high, and I'm in the living room and I just go, it's gone, like that. The big nest egg that I thought we had was gone. And then I realized the days following that, I'm not living my life any differently. Maybe this will amaze some people. I still had some money, but mostly I just had my earning power. And it didn't change my concept of myself. I knew I had looked the other way. I always knew that was a weakness of mine. And so what I'm telling you and your listeners is sometimes we know these blind spots, but we are not willing to do the work to overcome them. Now, since then, I was 50 years old when all this happened, and now I'm 84. So I've had plenty of time to make that money back. And he and I divorced not too long after that. It wasn't because of that, but it was because of things like that.
Sounds like there were some reasons.
Yeah. Well, emotional. He also had an anger problem, and that's why I was afraid of differing with him. And when I say an anger problem, I had a fear of anger problem. I couldn't really stand up to him. So, emotional dynamics can affect financial decisions.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, with your vast experience, 60 years, you offer up this story, and it gets me thinking a lot of my work and how our relationship with money, how we relate, how we think, feel, and behave with money, for me, seems to be a version of a portal into our triggers, who we are as a person, just because money can highlight a lot of the inner side of ourselves. In your work, how, if anything at all, have you seen money could be this trigger point for the deeper issues that need to be, I guess, explored?
Geez, I wrote a blog about this, Sean, and I can't remember what I said. But let me see if I can. I write for Substack. I remember writing a blog maybe 6 months ago on money as a mirror for how you do life. Okay, so what did I say? Well, kind of what I was saying a minute ago. I relate to money. Well, maybe I'll finish that sentence, and then I've got a new thought that just occurred.
Yeah.
I relate to money by not not doing my due diligence and so forth, and that's the way I relate to people too. Tend to trust, that sort of thing. And this is me. I would say not at this stage in my life. So I have corrected that. Believe me, I'm in a much healthier relationship now, and we both have enough money, so no, we don't have to get into any fights about money. None, zero. And that was my vow. I still don't want money to be an issue anymore. But so in a way, that's one way I relate to money. Like I want a man who's more or less equal in earnings to me. Is I like to avoid conflict. Okay, so maybe it seems like it's about money, but I just don't want the hassle that I had in that other relationship. Even though I mostly gave in to him, there was still a lot of conflict. So, um, let's just say, how do you relate to money, and what kind of patterns? Maybe a pattern of wishful thinking would be one, but also fearful thinking, never taking any risks. And that is, never taking any risk with money. I'm going to keep it all in a money market fund. I don't care what I lose in like inflation and so forth. I just I can't stand to lose anything. Now is that the way you also relate to like dating? Like a lot of people are dating, or not too many anymore, I hear. But
You hear people don't like dating?
Yeah, I'm kidding. I mean, I hear that young people are not as into relationships as I was when I was in my 20s. We needed relationships. There's a lot more people that are happily single or at least resigned to be single now. That's what I was referring to. But let's say in your dating life, because a lot of people are dating or looking or open, you're afraid to take any risks. You won't tell the other person how you feel about them until you know how they feel about you. So these are all patterns. And if you, sometimes it's only with one relationship that pattern shows up. But even then, life is trying to tell you something. Pay attention to this. If you're avoiding looking at, see what these patterns do is they avoid the complexity of the full picture, having to have inner conflict. Should I trust? Shouldn't I trust? There's some things I trust about this person. There's other things I don't trust. Both can be true, but how do I handle that kind of cognitive dissonance? So when you are playing with a full deck or really seeing reality as it is, it can be kind of overwhelming and complex. So we do deny certain parts and wishful think away certain other aspects. And I'm talking about aspects of reality now. Like this business I'm investing in doesn't really have good fundamentals. That type of thing. I didn't pay attention to that.
Hi, it's Sean. I know I'm breaking into the conversation just for a moment. There's good reason. If you're here, it means you care about living with more purpose, more meaning, and deeper connection. And that's exactly what the You Potential podcast is all about. When you hit that subscribe button, conversations like this, the ones that challenge you to think differently and open to new possibilities, keep showing up to you every week. And when you share this episode with someone you care, you're not just passing along a podcast. You're giving them a chance to reflect, to grow, and maybe even to reimagine what a good life can look like for them. So please take a second, subscribe, share it with a friend. Let's spread the conversations that truly matter. Now back to the show. It's so fascinating. And you talk about patterns, and that's what interests me about our relationships with money, because it just piggybacks on the other. I know I believe I've read that you have used conflict as a spiritual teacher. Can you touch on how we can actually accept conflict?
Well, conflict threatens people's feelings of safety generally. And it doesn't even have to be conflict. There's differences. I'd like to start with the idea that we're all different and we're going to have a difference. I was working with a couple this morning, and, she wants to leave for their vacation to Thailand on December 4th, and he wants to leave on December 24th. And that's a difference. And it doesn't have to become a conflict if they can, kind of, you want that? Why do you want that? Tell me more. oh, I empathize with your reason, and then you're curious about mine, and so that's a good way to deal with differences. And you look at what's underneath people's positions, and what I'm talking about now is negotiation skills. So this is like healthy conflict can actually produce innovative solutions, but that's not what we're usually having happen, because even differences before you get to the conflict, and like we talked about patience and listening before with regard to parenting, same thing with like a couple who's just planning a vacation. They have to really listen and really slow it all down. But the human nervous system tends to get threatened by differences, and this is actually built in, almost like at a deep neurological level. We kind of fear those who are different, and then difference in itself becomes kind of a thing that like scary. And so especially with somebody you love, and they want to parent the child one way, and you want to parent the child a different way, and it's our beloved child. There's just some serious differences. And so they push buttons or they trigger us, because what triggering means is all of a sudden, I don't feel safe here. I don't feel like I'm going to be heard. I've been dominated in the past. I've given too much. I know I got to stand my ground, but I think I'm going to lose this argument, type of thing. So we come in with all kinds of fear in our bodies, like sensations of shakiness and anxiety. And we have fear in our minds, like those stories, I'm going to lose, or I shouldn't give in. So these moments of difference create that lack of safety that's kind of an automatic tendency, and we call that getting triggered. It's if I have had to give in all my life, and I never felt like I got my way, even as a child, let's say, I'm going to have a tendency to be extra sensitive to somebody who's pushing their point of view or their wants, and I feel like I don't have any voice. So I'll react in some kind of fight, flight, freeze. That's what the nervous system does when people don't feel safe. It's just a built-in thing in the brain. There's a part of the brain that brain scientists call the survival alarm system, and it's always scanning for danger. And it has a bias toward danger because it's trying to keep us alive. It came from our primitive ancestors. We've always had this thing. It's called the amygdala part of the brain, and we all have one, and we all have that sort of perceptual bias to, am I safe? Am I safe? Scanning. Oh, that doesn't look safe. That person, I said something that I thought was brilliant, and that person's kind of looking away and shaking their head. What does that mean? Oh, and so we're scanning all the time. I'm not safe with that person. They don't like me. So it's helpful. So we're talking about how conflict can lead to personal growth and possibly better relationships. You need to understand that you have that part of your nervous system that is basically a survival alarm, and it will tend to go off even when somebody gives you like a dirty look, and you're not being mortally wounded, but you have some kind of fear reaction to that. Now, a lot of us, if things don't go the way we want, we initially will react with anger, because that's a kind of protection, get big if something's threatening you. But deep down, each and every one of us has some core need that in childhood was not fully met. Almost everybody. And core needs like the need to feel wanted, the need to feel valued, the need to feel good enough, the need to feel that my voice matters, the need to have your boundaries respected and not be overwhelmed and over-controlled. So these are just some of the core needs that all children need to grow up healthy. And parents are not perfect. They're going to fall down on some of these. Not not that you have to have every core need met perfectly, but good enough. So each of us has something. Like a lot of my male clients in relationships is like, I can't do anything right. It's my core fear is I can't do anything right, and the woman is my needs don't matter. I hate to promote gender stereotypes like that, but that is a lot of what I see. And in that one of those books that you read, 5-Minute Relationship Repair, goes through that dynamic with one couple for all the chapters because it's so classic. I want to feel loved and valued, and I want you to hear me when I have a complaint. But when he hears a complaint, he shuts down, because he threatens his feeling of, I just want to win with her. I just want to be seen as a good partner. I can't win, that feeling. So couples need to recognize when they're in that kind of vicious cycle. Like the more she asks for something, the more he feels inadequate, and the more and then kind of withdraws or shuts down because he feels like, I can't win, so why even try? And then the more he is kind of withdrawn, the more she needs contact and tell me what you're thinking. And so there's these cycles that it would be really good if couples could get interested in how that dynamic works in couples, and then they could realize, oh, honey, that's our cycle. That's the thing we always do kind of automatically when we don't feel safe. And it's not that you're the problem, it's our cycle is the problem. So this is a very sophisticated view of relationships. And I think it's one that if people are going to have happy relationships, they need to learn. And it's in that book, 5-Minute Relationship Repair. So the personal growth then involves, what is that core fear that is in me that makes me so sensitive to when he wants to spend time with his buddies and not me? What is that? Oh, I kind of, it feels like the story of my life in some way, or at least it's happened before. And if I feel deeply into that abandonment kind of feeling in my heart and in my belly, sometimes I remember things from childhood that are kind of similar. And I think relationships are partly for spiritual development and healing, in that I'm forced to go back and feel some pain that I never let myself really feel when I was little, because I was little, and you can't handle that scary thought feeling, oh, I'm being abandoned. You just kind of shut down and cope. Little kids are not as authentic as we think. They're dealing with a lot of overwhelming feelings. Certainly the not good enough feeling, because there's always older kids who can do it better than you, and and I'm trying to keep up with the older kids and belong, but I don't know what I'm doing. I try to imitate them. So try to remember what it's like to be 8 and 6 and 5, if you could, or pay attention to your children, because that will give you empathy for your own younger self, who developed some of these patterns of just shutting down when you were criticized, or trying to put on a happy face when you were abandoned is not an accurate word, but when you thought you were being abandoned. Your father maybe didn't pick you up at school when he said he would, and that's a little traumatic for a kid. It doesn't really mean abandoned, but if that happened, and certainly if it happened a few times, the poor dad, maybe he had his own reasons, but the kids take things personally. So knowing, like, my partner just triggered that because he didn't want to be with me tonight, and then I feel the feelings associated with that, and it sometimes can bring back memories. Sometimes it doesn't have to bring back memories. It will give you there's something back there kind of like this. And the important piece, Sean, is when you're going back there, that you let yourself feel the hurt, the hopelessness, the fear, particularly, with a witness consciousness that you can kind of bring in through some breath practices that I teach. It's in the books. And you kind of make a space inside yourself to hold this hurting 8-year-old or however old she was, like a much-loved child, like your own child. And you've heard words like inner child work. And this is inner child work. It's coming to terms with some unfortunate things that happened in your past, but letting yourself feel what you couldn't feel then because you were little and your nervous system and your whole body, couldn't handle that much intensity. Now you can. You're big now. People forget when they're triggered, they forget that you're big now. You can handle this. You can take your little child and go, "Oh, honey." Or if you don't want to go into that level of detail, at least you can know there's some hurt in there that needs nurturing. And you can just, like, you're hurting, your partner disappointed you, you can pause and give your own self a little hug, a little pat, something that works to bring you more in your back to your comfort zone, back to feeling safe again. So feeling safe is critical for humans in order to dare to speak their truth, to be able to see truth. If you don't feel safe, and a lot of us don't much of the time, then this work is for you. You'll probably have a lot of conflict in your relationships for a while, but by doing the work, I call it trigger work, inquiring into your triggers, with a willing partner who's doing that themselves too, that would be ideal. Then you can grow together and actually heal. Well, heal the pain that's always kind of pushing, and making you a little bit inappropriate in terms of how much demanding you are or how protective you are. A lot of us are a little over the top in one of those ways because that's how we learn to feel safe as children. But now it's a new time of life here, a time to help yourself grow up.
It's so fascinating, and the question started around conflict and how it can really be this teacher to use the words you just said, help ourselves grow up. I can't help but think about my own thoughts right now because that's what's in my brain. That's a normal process, I think. But yeah, and I have always considered myself like an optimistic person. And perhaps those were my blind spots. Earlier, I mentioned something about what happens if we have an optimistic blind spots. And those have definitely led me astray many, many, many times in my life. I never thought that looking inside of myself on a deeper level to this inner child work, it just wasn't in my zone of awareness. And over the years, as I'd done that, I found it incredibly insightful to realize that, holy smokes, like these behaviors are actually my own versions of defensiveness or triggers, whatever the terminology is, in this case, triggers. And having that level of awareness helps me be more aware of when I'm doing that. You can actually feel it. Now, let me get something straight. I get it wrong quite often, but at least it's there. And it was just really insightful for myself. For people listening who perhaps have never worked on, recognized, maybe they don't have triggers, I don't know, but never done this type of work. They're listening, they might be curious. What would you say to that archetype of a person, or not archetype, but that person?
Well, if you're single and you don't have a lot of interdependent relationships, you're not a parent.
Sorry, Susan, I'm going to jump in here. I'm relationships.
Okay,
From
just
an
for
orientation
relationships.
of relationship, yeah.
Okay, so if if you're in a relationship, there's going to be some times when you're going to have to deal with some inconvenient differences. And we could call those inconvenient truths. I mean, I want this and you want that. So anytime you're in a relationship, even if you aren't familiar with the language I've been using, you know about my partner wants this and I wish he or she didn't want that. I wish they would want what I want. So just starting there and noticing how that feels. Just noticing how you feel when something doesn't meet your desires or expectations. That right there will take you wherever you need to go. It'll take you all the stuff that I just said, especially if you can reveal this to your partner. Say, honey, when this happened, you said this, and I had a different angle on it. Let me tell you what went on inside of me right afterwards. And then I'll tell you that's not going on anymore. But, I I remember I kind of changed the subject. I didn't want to get into that. I think I was scared. I think maybe I was scared that you would feel more distant from me if I told you what I wanted, and so forth. So you sit with it, and insights of your own will come up if you're sincere and curious about yourself. And it's good, though, to then come back and share it with a partner who's willing to do that. If you don't have a partner who's interested in this stuff, well, maybe you can find somebody else to reveal this stuff to, because it does help to hear yourself talk and be heard, because that helps with the self-acceptance piece. I'm not this perfect paragon of calmness all the time, even though I act that way. There's other stuff going on under the surface, and I'm willing to go public and admit that. And that's self-acceptance.
You talk about self-acceptance and self-compassion. We hear self-acceptance. What role in this equation does self-compassion play?
Well, self-acceptance would be a prerequisite to self-compassion, but at the same time, self-compassion, and I'll define both of those terms in a minute, but self-compassion can help you have more self-acceptance. So to admit that I have a sensitive spot inside of me, like a trigger point, that doesn't like anybody to criticize or complain in my direction. Nobody really likes criticizing and complaining, but I have a bit more reaction. I either start shutting down, or I start getting more revved up. Different people are different, but the signs are I don't like it. One way or the other, how you react. But when you don't like something. So beginning to see that and go, oh, well, that's me. That's self-acceptance. I do that, rather than trying to cover it up. Oh, no, I'm accepting of everything. You stop bullshitting yourself. You go, oh, that's me. And somehow through that, you do develop a kind of compassion, because you're kind of softening around that thing that you thought was a bad thing about yourself. You're going, oh, yeah, and that's, you're kind of saying, and that's okay. I'm sensitive to criticism, and that's okay. And then that will bring you a modicum of self-compassion. But if you really want to get to the bottom of deep self-compassion, you would do the, okay, when have I felt like this before? Is there anything, earlier memories or associations, or even just intuitions that maybe something happened to me? And you can bring back the younger, tender part that never really got a voice in the matter because they were just trying to survive. The little person who never got to say, I don't want this, or I don't like this, because the consequences would have been dire. You'd get smacked. And a lot of kids have been smacked. Or, in my business, I hear people getting smacked for just not getting straight A's. Not so much in this country, but in other cultures. It makes me sad that other cultures are still so perfectionistic with their kids. But anyway, we're talking about self-compassion here. When you can find kind of even one memory, you don't really need a memory, but you get some sense of a vulnerable you from an earlier age. And that just naturally, if you've done the kind of breath work to calm your nervous system before you start inquiring into the past. When I say inquiring, I mean, you're just going, what's coming up? I'm feeling this bodily sensation of kind of fear and thoughts about, oh, I got to get out of here. What comes up now? And sometimes memories will come and sometimes they don't. But the deeper self-compassion work involves embracing that hurting part of you, because it's sort of like a part of you, the child part of you, as a much loved child. And that's a deeper level of self-compassion that really loves the parts of you that you have often thought get you into trouble, like too needy or too independent. If you've had those thoughts about yourself, if you inquire into where that needy feeling maybe originated or where you learned to not depend on anybody too much, where that came from, you just naturally feel tender towards yourself.
Mm. Tender towards yourself. I like that statement. It seems like this self-compassion can help insulate against the thinking and having shame around our behaviors.
Yes, absolutely. And shame, if you have shame, start with that. Anything that you feel, it doesn't even have to be triggered by somebody else. If you have shame, go, shame. I know that I call this shame, but what is it really? What does it feel like in my body? What are the thoughts that come in? And so investigate any unpleasant emotion or experience, and that'll give you some self-awareness at least, and hopefully acceptance and compassion.
Earlier, you were talking about the 5-minute repair, your 5-minute repair book that you wrote. I found it really, really insightful. We're talking a lot about some deep work here that requires a lot of inner reflection, sitting with parts of us that we might not have explored before that are going to create discomfort. It's complex to do this on ourselves, yet you had another human being who has their own untold or unexplored stories that are being triggered. How on earth can we have a 5-minute repair when this is so complex in relationships?
It's not really a 5-minute repair, Sean.
It's a good title for a book, though.
It's a good, repair means, first let me define that term. Repair comes from the idea that we all stumble and fall. We all mess up in our trying to communicate with each other. And the best thing we can do for ourselves is learn how to repair. After we think there's been a lot of damage done, what do we do to repair the damage? And so repair means coming back and owning, oh, I was triggered. I'm sorry that I walked out on you, or I'm sorry I called you that name. I mean, some ugly things happen when we're triggered, but you have to own it. I'm sorry I did that. That was me being triggered. I don't mean that anymore. And then you can explain a little more about, maybe something got triggered from my childhood, and you don't have to talk about the explanation really, as long as you own that it's your reaction that might have had the other person feeling unsafe, and you care. I'm sorry might not always be the right term, but some form of caring. That's what a repair is. So you have made a mess, and you need to be willing to come back and admit you did, and basically say you're sorry. That's repair.
As I was reading through this part of your book, I've heard you talk about, and I'm going to maybe get the nuance of words incorrectly, but you can help me out. Being authentic is important in these moments. Yet, if we're not self-aware enough, our authenticity in these repairs could just become our defensive mechanisms that we're actually just hurting the other person.
Right. That's
Am I getting
that's
this
what
correct?
absolutely. I say we can only be as honest as we are self-aware. So a lot
Okay,
of the
yeah.
things that people say that they think they're being honest, like telling your boss he's full of shit. Yeah, I mean, he might be full of shit, but here's a better way to say it. Boss, when you and you or anybody, criticizing your kids, whatever, don't do it as a criticism. When I heard you say this, or your kid, when I saw your room all dirty after I had just vacuumed it, here's what came up for me. So you reveal something about yourself. You name something specific that happened, and then something else specific and real that happened inside of you. And we can take it from there, but I'll just give you that much of like the right way to do things. But I think you were asking review where we were going with this, so I can.
Well, that statement actually reminds me even more, and it's coming from maybe not just nonviolent communication, but this idea of like, I'm going to name something that happened, I'm going to reveal how it made me feel, and then a request. I have stumbled across as my own, and I've seen other people that in doing that process, if I'm not self-aware enough to recognize that this is coming from a lens of defensiveness and not like authentic self-awareness,
Right.
it's not
Right.
going to
Right.
land as much as I
Yeah.
want it to land to the other person.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't. I mean, sometimes you can have a request. That's all of these practices are done by agreement with a partner,
Mhm.
because a lot of people make requests as demands. Oh, and I expect this to happen now that I've gone out of my way to say it. So that could be a lack of self-awareness in practicing the nonviolent communication tool. So
Yeah.
mine's a little different, but so I said you can only be as honest as you are self-aware, and honesty sometimes is just dumping on somebody. So how do you clean up? How do you know you're really being the most authentic person possible? You first of all watch the results, because a lot of times, if you're somewhat triggered or somewhat in one of those automatic patterns, the other person will pick up something's off here, and maybe it's because they're scared, but either way, something might be off with you, or you might have just said something in a way that triggered them. Either way, it might be an indication that there was something that you said that wasn't very self-aware, or it might be that this person's just very, very triggerable, and there's nothing you could have done. You made us said everything perfect, and some people will get triggered. So, but looking at the results of your communication is one way you can begin to see, well, am I doing it right? Um, Another way is to imagine, okay, I'm going to have this difficult conversation. Sometimes you have to think about a conversation before you have it. I'm going to have this conversation, and what do I feel going into this? What is it that I want out of this conversation? And really examine what your true intent is, and start with that. And the only intent that you ought to be coming in with is, I want to know you, and I want to be known by you. That's what I call relating. I'm not trying to control you, get you to do something different, at least for openers. I mean, you can negotiate for results that you want, but the first agenda would be, can I share something that's up for me? And I share it, and after I do that, I want to hear how that lands for you. And so that's a self-aware, the ultimate self-aware conversation is something where you're present to yourself and present to what comes. And that conversation is an ever-changing ocean, kind of like the ocean waves. New things keep coming. You can't predict it. You can't control it. And that's the ultimate self-awareness, is you adapt your comments based on what the environment does. So let's say if I did say something and the person accused me of being critical, I would first stop and go, hearing that, how do I feel? So communication is not about having a quick comeback or winning the argument. It's like, if good communication, it needs to originate from my honest inward and, thought reaction to what I just heard. And how do I hear something without distortion? Because we often do that too. That takes practice too. Some of the practices we've already talked about today, like knowing your blind spots and your tendencies. It's not easy. You said it. You said it's complex. and two people's unfinished childhood business come together. You'll never figure it all out. Don't even try. You just need to know the process for working with what's up.
I really appreciate your ocean analogy with the wave, and how you talked about adapting to the environment, because you're so right. Who am I to say you're so right? You're the one 60 years of...
No, I'm right. I'm right.
You're right. You're right. You are right. And no, it's just, I'm envisioning this wave. I cannot control a wave, no matter how strong I think I am. I cannot control a wave. And I think that's a great, I'm not going to say tip, a great piece of advice to embrace in our relationships is hear the information and then adapt it. And then from there.
Yeah. The way the metaphor is, imagine yourself a surfer surfing the ocean wave. And if you can kind of get in that mindset throughout life, you just deal with whatever comes to you. You can't control that wave, as you just said.
Is surrender part of this? Surrender, a peaceful practice of surrender to the relationship?
I would say surrender to whatever is in the moment. I'm not sure what you mean by surrender to the relationship.
I mean that, just surrender to... I'm thinking about surfing. You need to surrender to whatever the wave is.
That's right. Reality...
Resistance and resistance does not...
That's right.
Does not do... Yeah.
No, if anybody's resisting you, this is just a tip for life. Anybody's resisting you, they're saying no or something. Tell me more about why you feel that. Why is this still a no for you? And you're not trying to argue. You're trying to understand a little bit more. And sometimes when you do that, you do get some data for how to couch your arguments to prevail. But even more important, that other person gets to hear themselves. They get to feel respected and heard. And sometimes some of their resistance will soften. If they get respect, they're not as resistant. So be careful don't meet resistance with resistance in most cases. Now, we're not talking about life-threatening situations. We're just talking normal relationship stuff.
Susan, what's one simple ritual that couples can implement that builds safety and connectiveness?
One of my favorite couple rituals, and when we say ritual, I mean something that you don't do naturally, so you have to put it on the calendar for a while, but it's a positive thing that you can do with each other. And so we have to ritualize certain things in order to make it happen. So this one is a simple couple check-in. It sort of serves the purpose of how we doing, that type of thing. But the way it's got a little more detail than that. You ask your partner, what's one thing that I have done in the last period of time, a day or two since our last check-in, that has created distance between us? And so you're inviting them to reveal something and not resisting it. And so they're more apt to tell you something that's been on their mind. And if they held on to it, it wouldn't be good for your relationship. So what's one thing that's created distance? Thank you. And what's one thing that I've done that's created closeness or trust between us? And if couples agree, and then the other person asks the same question. If couples agree that that's a good thing to do, it's usually pretty friendly, and they get information out that doesn't come out sometimes in your busy life with kids and jobs and everything, and you need that type of information.
Letting a little steam out before it blows up.
That's it.
Well, Susan, it's been a pleasure to have you. I really, really appreciate getting a glimpse into your over 60 years of work in this field. Thank you so much for sharing your insights with our audience. For listeners, is there a specific book based on this conversation that you would point them towards? Of course, go check out all 11, but if they bought one.
Yeah, I think my latest book, From Triggered to Tranquil, is even better than the 5-minute relationship repair book that we've talked about. So either one, but this one that I like is From Triggered to Tranquil.
We'll put that in the show notes along with your website. And again, thank you for the work you're doing and joining me today.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, Sean.
Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode. That was a great conversation for me. I say that because as someone navigating all kinds of relationships, I felt lucky to be able to pick Susan Campbell's brain on what it takes to build meaningful relationships. We talked about triggers, conflict, self-compassion, self-awareness, and what it takes to build solid relationships that are built around safety and honesty. As I think about this episode, here's the thought that I'm taking away. When in my life, or your life, are we reacting instead of relating? As Susan says, when we do that, just notice it. No judgment, just awareness. Because sometimes it's not the answers that change us, it's in the question. If you enjoyed this episode, I know you will love episode number 11 with Dr. Todd Cashin. It's all about parenting with psychological flexibility and how to raise kids who ask good questions. And if you haven't yet subscribed to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts, please do that today. And if you want to go further, leave us a review. I'd appreciate that. Take care, and we'll see you next week.